I'll be presenting on the impact of habitat loss and fragmentation on the Carnaby's black cockatoos, breeding and foraging practices, and the effect on bird numbers in Western Australia. Okay, so who are the Carnabys and where they're found? The Carnaby's black cockatoo, scientific name Xander eotrosis, are a large, beautiful bird that is endemic to the southwest of WA. The average lifespan of a Carnaby's cockatoo is 40 to 50 years in the wild, and their area of occupancy spans from Kalbarri in the north all the way down to Esperance in the south. Okay, so what's the problem with the Carnaby's? The Carnaby's black cockatoo has seen a significant loss of its habitat, 90% in some parts of the wheat belt. The habitat loss has displaced the Carnaby's, which has presented challenges for them when it comes to breeding and feeding, with less nesting hollows available and a depleted food supply. The Carnaby's is considered an endangered species and has seen a 50% decline in numbers in the past 45 years. The habitat loss and fragmentation has caused three main issues in terms of breeding practices for the Carnaby's. The first has been the loss of traditional breeding hollows. The Carnaby's are large birds that are known to be selective in their breeding hollows, often opting for larger and older trees, which, given the extensive amount of land clearing, has impacted the number of available nesting sites for the birds. Secondly, the competition for breeding sites can pose a challenge for the Carnaby's, with the birds often finding themselves in roost competition with galahs or corellas. And finally, the survivability of chicks is also an issue, with a lack of food resources available within a reasonable distance to feed their young. This links to the impact that habitat fragmentation has had on the Carnaby's food sources and their ability to feed their young. Instead of having ideally a large continuous corridor of habitat for the Carnaby's to dwell in, it's become patchy and disconnected in parts. This has meant that the distance that the Carnaby's must travel to feed their babies has lengthened, which impacts the outcome for their young. Furthermore, while the Carnaby's diet has traditionally consisted of seeds from Banksia species, the clearing of Banksia woodland has impacted this food source. To make up for the loss, the Carnaby's have adapted to feeding on pine, a food source that is also at risk. Okay, why should we care? The Carnaby's black cockatoo has been listed as one of the 22 priority bird species facing extinction in the federal government's Threatened Species Action Plan. It's also important to mention that the protection of the Carnaby's will also benefit other threatened species that share their habitat. And lastly, while they contribute to the ecological community in the dispersal of seeds, the Carnaby's hold cultural significance to the First Nations people who rely on the Carnaby's to indicate shifts in the seasons. Let's look at what will happen if nothing is done to help the Carnaby's. In the immediate and short term, the Carnaby's will continue to be displaced and continue to see a decline in their numbers. This all stems from the loss of habitat. Carnaby's will be forced into urban areas in search of food, where they will be lost to road strikes, shooting by landowners, and may suffer from hind limb paralysis syndrome. Meanwhile, regeneration of numbers will continue to lag due to lack of available hollows. In the long term, there are three main issues. One is that the Carnaby's food sources will further be depleted given the proposed plans by the government to clear the Gnangara pine plantation. This is a food source that the Carnaby's rely heavily on. Secondly, the lack of revegetation by the government into land offsets will do little to improve the corridor of habitat for the Carnaby's black cockatoo. And finally, given the umbrella species status, the loss of Carnaby's numbers will also see further native species at risk. Okay, what is being done to help the Carnaby's currently? There are artificial hollow projects being carried out by numerous environmental groups to provide more nesting opportunities for the Carnaby's, with evidence suggesting that these artificial hollows do work. The federal government also has an initiative where it assists landowners to install artificial hollows on their land. There is also the Keep Carnaby's Flying Project, a project launched by Murdoch University in partnership with Lottery West, which aims to bring together community, local government and Aboriginal groups to raise awareness on protection of roost trees, vegetation corridors and providing water sources for the Carnaby's on a local level. Okay, so what can you do to help the Carnaby's black cockatoo? To start, you can raise the issue with your local MP, highlight the importance of the Gnangara pine plantation and oppose the clearing of it. Also, when you come across petitions on land clearing in the southwest, take a couple of minutes out of your day to consider signing it to help the cause. If you can, reach out to local conservation centres to donate, or perhaps you can volunteer some of your time instead. For those who have backyards, plant a cockatoo-friendly garden, and this includes putting in a bird bath. And finally, spread the word on the importance of these beautiful birds to the southwest of WA ecosystem.